Welcome back to Over the Horizon Sports Analysis from a Holographic Perspective. All the stats in this video come from baseballreference.com and baseballalmanac.com. The big question was, when we left the last video, what would happen in Game 2 of the World Series? And the big question was, would Jake Arrieta be able to rise to the occasion? As we've looked at his historical twin, Mordecai Peter Centennial Brown, and would Mordecai Brown retake the mound for Game 2 of the World Series? As you see the picture on the screen, that is Mordecai Brown, the Cubs ace from 1908, and he pitched in the fourth game, the first game and the fourth game of the World Series in 1908. In 1908, Game 4, which was played on 10/13 of 1908, it was a 4-day. The 13th is a 4-day. It was Mordecai Brown's most compatible day. And this game that was just played in 2016 was played on 10/26 of 2016 to 26. It's an 8-day, which is a most compatible with Jake Arrieta. And it is, since they're both running the same 33-6 program, it would have been the same most compatible day with Mordecai Brown. So I would figure there should be close results to what happened with Mordecai Brown's game on 10/13 of 1908. And Mordecai Brown, he pitched a complete game. He gave up 0 runs, gave up 4 hits, and Jake Arrieta on Game 2 on October 26th, he gave up 1 run on 2 hits in 5 2/3 innings, almost 6 innings. As we look at the heroes that we gave that were most probable for that day, hitting-wise, we see Dexter Fowler had 1 hit. Hayward only had 2 at-bats and no hits. Bryant had 1 run, 1 hit. Russell, who bats last, .238 average, he had 1 hit, 1 RBI, and a walk. Coughlin did not play. That was for the Cubs. The Indians hitters, Davis, he had 0 hits on 2 at-bats. Lindor, he had 1 hit. Lindor had 0 hits. Lindor and Ramirez were most compatibles on that day, and I said they would only get 1 hit or none at all. Neither Lindor nor Ramirez got any hits, so I was right on that. Napoli, he had 2 hits. That was the big hitter for the Indians that day. Chisenhall had 2 at-bats, 0 hits, and Crisp had 0 hits. The pitchers that we forecast that would come in as relievers that day, the best relievers for Chicago would have been Montgomery, which you've seen for 2 innings. He was on his best day, and no runs were scored. And Chapman, the closer, he came in for 1.1 innings and gave up no hits. For Cleveland, their relievers that we said would be bad on that day would either be Clevenger or McAllister. They brought in McAllister, and they shouldn't have. He gave up 2 runs and left the next run, was on third base with 1 out. So then the following pitcher gave up that run also. We looked at the hitting star of the first game, Roberto Perez, and seen how well he hits on his day, which is a 7-day, and he hits a 350 batting average on his day, whereas the rest of his batting average throughout the year is only 188. He had 2 home runs in that first game, And this game, I decided to take a look at someone that I didn't think would do that well, and that was Ben Zobrist. He is a 5 program. Let me find the paper here that I have. He was born on 5/26 of 1981 as a 32. 3 plus 2 is a 5. It's the same 5 program that I run. We look at him, it was an 8-day, so that should have been his worst day. He actually had 2 hits. The one was a triple, and he was going against McAllister, which is a 9 program. You always see whether the pitcher is a 9 or the pitcher is a 5, and the hitter's a 9 or the hitter's a 5. When it's opposite like that with a 9 and 5, they hit a lot. The 1 and 5 programs do the same thing. The 2 and 6 programs do the same thing. The 3 and 7 programs do the same thing. And that's where you see a connection at the quantum level between those programs. But it struck me funny that he had 2 hits on an 8-day, which is his worst day. And just to prove that, we look at Ben Zobrist's season batting average. Now it's 272. So on his 2 worst days, which should be a 2 and an 8-day, I should see batting averages less than a 272. And let's see what we have here on a 2-day for the entire 2016 season. Every time he played on a 2-day, which is the 2nd, the 11th, the 20th, and the 29th, I did those stats. And we'll see, we come up with 19 hits for 76 at-bats, and that is a 250 average, which is only 22.22 under his 272 average. So that's a little lower. We look at the 8-day, which is also a bad day for a 5 program. And during the regular season, he was 8 hits for 45 at-bats, which is only a 177 average. So we almost dropped 100 points from the 272 average that is culminated through all the days. When we look just at that 8-day, he was only hitting a 177 average. And factoring in the playoffs and the World Series now, there was 2 games on an 8-day. He is 11 for 53, which brings his average up to 207, which is still almost 70 points under his season average. Now, to make up for that, he's going to have to hit better on his most compatible days or his 5-day. The reason he hits bad on 8 and 2 days is because the frequencies that create those days are not compatible with his 5 advanced holographic program. The 5-day is his day, is when he's most, everything's on. He'll have good days on his 1st and 3rd and 7 days. 9 days are neutral. Let's look here now. Remember, his batting average for the entire year, regular season, was 272. If we look at all his 5-day games, which is the 5th, the 14th, the 23rd, we have he was 14 for 49, which is a 285 average. It's not that much higher than the 272. But when we look at the 3-day, which is one of his most compatibles, somewhere along the line, you're going to have to make up that 100-point difference, 120-point difference from the 2 and the 8-day, which are his worst. So we only made up a little bit there with the 285. Now we look at the 285 that he hits on a 5-day, which is his day. On his most compatible 3-day, I went through and did the statistics on that, and he is hitting 22 for 62. So that's a 354 average. So, there you're making up the difference. If you did the 7 days and the 1 days, you should see also that he would more than likely be above the 272. The 9-day, that's going to be optional. And it all has to do also with what day the pitcher's on and stuff. I would expect his 5-day to be higher than the 3, but it's not. And that's, I think, everything from that second game. So far in the first 2 games, we've seen reflections of the second and third games of the 1908 World Series. In the 1908 World Series Game 2, we had the Detroit Tigers. They had 1 run, 4 hits, and 2 errors. Hold on a second, let me find that again. Okay, sorry about that. I got about 6 different papers here. I got notes on. I'm trying to piece together as we go. That's why I always have such a hard time with this stuff. Once we get to hockey and everything else and it's easy, it'll just be like running it right off. But in 1908, Game 2, that was played on 10/11/1908, the Detroit Tigers had 1 run, 4 hits, 1 error. Game 2 of this series, 2 nights ago, the Cleveland Indians had 1 run, 4 hits, 2 errors. The Chicago Cubs in the 1908 Game 2 of the World Series had 6 runs, 7 hits, and 1 error. In the Game 2 of the 2016 World Series, the Chicago Cubs had 5 runs, 9 hits, 0 errors, for a total of 21 runs, hits, and errors for the 2016 Game 2 of the World Series. And we had a total of 20 runs, hits, and errors of the Game 2 of the 1908 World Series. And what we've seen from the Game 3 World Series in 1908 was Jack Pfister. That was the only game the Cubs lost. And we've seen John Lester, which is his polarity. He lost Game 1. So those 2 games pretty much transposed each other. And what we haven't seen yet is anything from Game 1 of the 1908 World Series, which I believe is, by the way the programs are set up, the frequencies that the starting pitchers have, and how they are on those days, and how the team functioning levels are on those days, compared to the pitchers in the 1908 Game 1 World Series between the Cubs and the Tigers. I believe we're going to see a lot of similarities in this Game 3 coming up Friday, tomorrow, as we've seen in Game 1 of the 1908 World Series, played on October 10th of 1908. And what we have going is the Cubs function as a 1 team. They're on their best day. They're at home. Familiar frequencies. The Cubs pitcher is Hendricks. He's a 1 program. He's on his day. You can't have a better setup than what the Cubs have for this next game. The Indians are a 4 functioning team on that strange day. They're on the road, and that seldom goes well for that team. The Indians pitcher, Tomlin, he's a 6 program on the road, and that's about as bad as it can get. Tomlin, he's a great pitcher. They're all great pitchers. But there's certain days, just like we've seen with, Zobrist hitting and Perez hitting, and you can do this with every hitter, pitcher, anything you want to in sports. In baseball, you can do it in hockey, you can do it in football. If you want the chart that I have where it gives all the numbers and how they interact with all these programs and everything, it's in video 4 and 5 of the Trump the Magnificence of America, Nobody's a Picture Perfect. That's the one that I made up. Different researchers have different ones, but it's on the screen for like an hour for those 2 videos. So you can just write it down and use it for whatever you want. It pretty much works. That's what I use in sports, politics, daily life. You can see it happen, the stuff happening all the time around that. So this is one of these games, like when I seen the Dodgers had Maeda on a 2-day, and he's a 5 program. I just laughed. Yeah, okay, well, Cubs got that game. And while the Dodgers are saving Kershaw for the next game, which was on a 4-day, and Kershaw's a 3 program, I said, well, that's the end of that series. Cubs are going to win that one. This is one of these you can just look at and laugh, because it's like the coach has no clue how reality functions. He's going to have to pull Tomlin early. I don't really see Tomlin making it past 4 innings. I see him giving up 2, 3, or 4 runs, however many the coach allows him in for. The managers for that game is Terry Francona. He's a 5 program. He's on a most compatible day. But this is one of those games that a manager can't do anything about. He's already pretty much sealed the deal for the first couple innings with putting a 6 program in, Tomlin, on the road on a 1-day. It's not going to work. You'll see. Keep your eye on it. Joe Madden, the Cubs manager, he's on his worst day again, but there's really not going to be much to manage there. Hendricks, he might be a little nervous, being his first World Series game, but he's on his day. This is where, complete games come from, or no-hitters, or perfect games. Hendricks is on his day, and he should be untouchable, basically. This game is tracking towards Game 1 of the 1908 World Series, from the fact that the Cubs scored 10 runs on that day, and they were up against a least compatible pitcher, just like Tomlin is. So I'm thinking the Cubs score between 6 and 10 runs in this game. And looking at the Cleveland, what they have going against that pitcher on his day, against the team, the Cubs on their day, I'm looking at Cleveland tracking towards about 0 to 3 runs, 4 at the absolute most, and I don't even think that. The over-under for that game is 8. This here is a game that's tracking the over. Let's see what other information we got here. Okay, the bad relievers for the Cubs this day, and they probably won't need any, except maybe one before the closer, if that, because Hendricks should go 7, 8 innings. I don't think they'd let him in for a complete game, but he could probably do it. The bad relievers for the Cubs this day would be Chapman, Strop, Montgomery, and Wood. The bad relievers for the Indians on this day, on that 1 day, and you're going to see a lot of Indians relievers probably. The coach doesn't know who to put in, so he's going to put a lot of these bad ones in after the Tomlin has a bad day on that 6th day on the road, on a 6 program on the road on a 1 day. That's not going to go well. So the Indians are going to bring in a bunch of relievers, I'm sure, in this game. You'll probably see 3 or 4. The ones you don't want to see if you're an Indians fan is Merritt, Shaw, Miller, Otero, and Manship. So any one of those 5 guys are on their worst day. Like I said, they're all great pitchers, every one of them. But the coach just don't know what days to play them. All the coach has to do is go look at the numbers on the days and say, hey, there's something going on here, whether it's the hitters, pitchers, or anything. The best Indians relievers on this day is Allen, Clevinger, and McAllister. McAllister, who just gave up the 2 runs in Game 2. This is one of his best days coming up. So we'll see if he gets back in. The best Cubs relievers for this Game 3 coming up, which is a 1 day, would be Edwards, Rondon, and Grimm. And I don't think you'll get to see many Cubs relievers, at the most, probably 1 before the closer. the best hitters for this day from the Cubs. It's hard to pick here. Everyone will contribute. If the player isn't a most compatible day, he's linked to the pitcher, Tomlin, the 6 program. You know, the one, how we link with the 1-5, the 9-5 programs, the 2 and 6 programs, the 3 and 7 programs, the 4 and 8 programs. Yeah, they're and the even programs tend to hit the even pitchers more, just like hockey games. You look at goalies and the goal scorers. You know, normally it's players on their most compatible day or on their best day. You know, a lot of times you'll have, like the one game I watched the other day, it was the box score I read. The goalie was a 4 program. There was 3 goals scored against him, all by 2 programs. So the evens all attract, the odds all attract, they connect, and it's just the way it is. It's kind of like how we find our mates, our friends, who we're attracted to, who we're repelled from. It all works around these frequencies all the time. We look at the Indians and their best hitters on this one day coming up, which is Game 3, Friday, of the World Series. We have Kipnis, Brantley, Santana, Perez, and Naquin. And like I said, anytime I mispronounce names, it's because I've never heard them. I just read box scores pretty much, or articles. So the main thing we got out of Game 2 is that Mordecai Brown, his future twin, Jake Arrieta, you know, they did exactly almost the same of what was done in 1908, just a few innings short. Mordecai Brown in 1908 pitched in 2 games. One was a complete game, one was 2 innings. So he had a total of 11 innings. Jake Arrieta is at 5 2/3 innings. We'll see if he pitches Game 6 in Cleveland, how many innings he gets there. On that day, he's going to be on his worst day, just like Mordecai Brown was on that day. He only came in as a reliever and pitched 2 innings. But he did manage to get the win there. That's when the Cubs blew up in the 9th inning on that Detroit pitcher that was on his worst day, Ed Summers. He was an 8 program. They scored 5 runs on 6 hits in the top of the 9th to win that game. I don't see this game going like that tomorrow, but I do see a lot of runs for the Cubs between 6 and 10. Only about 0-3 for the Indians, 0-3 runs, and the over of 8. That's pretty much the things we're looking at tomorrow, what is showing, and that's a replay from the Cubs in the Game 1 of the 1908 World Series. And we'll see what else happens, who turns out to be the big hitter, and we'll see if we can find their twin in history. But for now, yeah, Mordecai Peter Centennial Brown, he, true to his name, he came back in 100 years as Jake Arrieta and did it on the mound in Game 2 of the 2016 World Series. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll try to get my act together a little bit better. And we'll see how we do through this game tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Good night.